The throne hall of Ashenmore had never held so many wolves. Serena pressed her back against the cold stone of the western gallery, her breath coming in shallow gasps as she watched the ceremony unfold in the vast chamber below. 1,000 torches blazed from iron sconces along the walls, their flickering light casting long shadows across the faces of pack leaders, noble families, and common wolves who had journeyed from every territory in Valderath to witness this moment. The claiming right. She should not have come. Every instinct screamed at her to retreat, to return to the hidden passage behind the kitchens where she had spent 2 days waiting for Dravek to send word. But no messenger had come. No secret note slipped beneath her door. No explanation for his sudden silence after months of whispered promises. And so she had come to see for herself. The Alpha King stood upon the raised platform at the heart of the hall, his powerful frame draped in ceremonial black and crimson. Even from this distance, Serena could trace the sharp lines of his jaw, the dark hair that swept back from his brow, the commanding presence that made every wolf in the chamber lower their eyes in instinctive submission. For 8 months, she had known another version of him, the man who traced the curve of her spine with trembling fingers in moonlit gardens, the man who buried his face in her hair and breathed her name like it was the only word that mattered. The man who had pressed his mouth to the soft flesh of her inner thigh and left his claiming mark there, hidden from the world but burning with the promise of forever. When the council accepts my choice, he had sworn against her skin, I will present you to the kingdom. You will stand beside me as Queen Serena. No power in this world will prevent that. She had believed every word. Her hand drifted to the swell of her belly beneath her loose servant's dress. Another secret, one she had been saving to tell him tonight, after the ceremony ended and he came to her chamber as he always did. She had practiced the words 100 times, imagined the light in his amber eyes when he learned that his heir grew within her. The candidates will now present themselves before the Alpha King, the High Priestess announced, her ancient voice echoing through the hushed hall. Serena's fingernails carved crescents into her palms as 7 women in flowing silver gowns ascended the platform steps, daughters of the most powerful bloodlines in Valderath, each one groomed from childhood for this possibility, each one beautiful, each one worthy. And leading them, her platinum hair cascading like liquid moonlight, walked Meridia of House Veilstrom. The gathered wolves murmured with approval. The Veilstroms controlled the eastern mountain territories and commanded 5,000 warriors. They had been maneuvering for this outcome for years, and everyone knew it. Serena searched Dravek's face for any flicker of the man she loved. Any sign of warmth? Any hint of recognition? Any indication that his heart still belonged to a servant girl with no name, no house, no standing? His expression was carved from granite. Dravek, Alpha King of Valderath, blood of the eternal moon, the High Priestess intoned. You have consulted with your council. You have weighed the alliances and treaties. Your kingdom awaits your declaration. The silence stretched like a blade across Serena's throat. She stopped breathing. The mark on her thigh pulsed with sudden heat, a phantom burn that matched the frantic rhythm of her heart. Surely he could feel it too. The bond between them had always been a living thing, a thread of fire connecting their souls across any distance. Surely he would turn, would find her in the shadows, would declare to all assembled that his choice had already been made in secret gardens where 2 fated souls had recognized each other. Dravek stepped forward. His movement was wrong. Serena saw it immediately. The fluid grace that defined his every gesture was gone, replaced by something stiff and mechanical. His gait held none of the predatory elegance she knew so intimately. And his eyes, those amber eyes that blazed like captured sunlight when he looked at her, appeared flat, distant, empty of everything that made him the man she loved. I claim, his voice rang out, hollow as an abandoned tomb, Meridia of House Veilstrom. The hall erupted. Cheers shook the ancient stones. Wolves howled their approval. Noble families embraced as centuries of political maneuvering finally bore fruit. The alliance that would strengthen Valderath's borders for generations had been secured, and Serena felt something inside her shatter into 1,000 pieces. The mark on her thigh flared with sudden, searing agony. She gasped, doubling over in the shadows, her hand flying to the spot where his teeth had claimed her flesh. It burned as though his bite was being ripped from her body, torn away by invisible claws. Through tear-blurred vision, she watched Dravek take Meridia's hand, watched him raise it to his lips in the traditional gesture of acceptance. Watched the Veilstrom woman smile with cold triumph while the man Serena loved showed nothing at all. He did not look for her. He did not hesitate. He did not seem to remember she existed. A broken sound escaped Serena's throat, swallowed by the cacophony of celebration. She stumbled backward, desperate to escape before the grief crushed her completely. Her shoulder struck a pillar. Her hip collided with a stone railing. But she kept moving, kept running, kept fleeing from the moment her entire world collapsed into ash. The servants' passages were empty, everyone having gone to witness the ceremony. Serena ran through them blind, one hand pressed to her burning mark, the other wrapped protectively around her belly. The child, his child, growing inside her while he chose another woman to be his queen. She would not stay to watch him wed Meridia, would not remain in the castle where she had given him everything, believed his promises, been fool enough to think a servant girl with strange powers could ever truly hold the heart of a king. Serena reached her tiny chamber and began to gather her few possessions with trembling hands. 2 worn dresses, her mother's bone comb, the dried herbs she kept for the nausea that plagued her mornings. She paused at the narrow window, looking out at the celebration bonfires being lit across the capital. Somewhere in that throne hall, Dravek was accepting congratulations for his wise choice. Meridia was probably already planning their wedding feast, and no one knew that the Alpha King's true mate was disappearing into the night with his heir growing in her womb. Serena pressed her fingers to the cold glass, her breath fogging the surface. "Goodbye, my heart," she whispered to the darkness. "May you find whatever it was you wanted more than me." Then she pulled her worn cloak around her shoulders and slipped through the kitchen passage, vanishing into the bitter winter night. She did not see the figure that appeared at the high window of the throne hall moments later. She did not see the amber eyes that suddenly blazed with wild, desperate awareness, cutting through whatever fog had held them prisoner. She did not hear the howl of anguish that split the sky like a blade through silk, a sound so raw and broken that wolves across the kingdom lifted their heads and whimpered in shared grief. And she did not see the Alpha King collapse to his knees, clutching his head as though something inside him had finally, violently shattered free. By the time Dravek reached her chamber, Serena was already gone. Only her scent remained, fading fast, and mingled with it, something else. Something that made his wolf howl with a desperation that bordered on madness, the scent of new life, of his child, vanishing into the snow. 4 months later, the village of Briarwood Hollow had almost forgotten it harbored a stranger. Serena had arrived at the edge of winter's worst fury, a young widow, she claimed, seeking refuge from tragedy. The village elders had taken pity on her haunted eyes and the obvious swell beneath her threadbare cloak, offering her the abandoned cottage at the forest's edge in exchange for whatever healing skills she possessed. She had accepted without asking questions. Now spring was clawing its way through the last remnants of frost, and Serena had become simply the healer woman who lived where the trees began. She delivered babies. She set broken bones. She brewed teas for fevers and made poultices for wounds that would not close. And every night, she lay awake with her hands on her swollen belly, feeling the life within her kick and turn. Sometimes the movements came from opposite sides at once, as if 2 small bodies were pushing in different directions, fighting for space. The village midwife had remarked on her size, suggesting she might be carrying more than a single blessing. Serena tried not to think about what that might mean. "You are strong," she whispered in the darkness, speaking to the children she would never let their father claim. Strong like the wolves of old. Strong like the mothers who came before you. The thought of Dravek still sent pain lancing through her chest. 4 months, and the wound had not begun to heal. If anything, it had festered, growing more agonizing with each passing week. The mark on her thigh had never stopped burning. Serena had examined it countless times, watching in confusion as the scar tissue seemed to darken and deepen rather than fade. Among wolfkind, rejection was supposed to sever the bond completely. The mark should have disappeared within weeks, leaving nothing behind but smooth skin and bitter memories. Instead, it pulsed with heat that kept her from sleep. It ached when the wind blew from the west, from the direction of Ashenmoor. And sometimes, late at night when exhaustion finally dragged her under, she could swear she felt something through it. A presence, vast and desperate, searching, always searching. But that was impossible. Dravek had chosen another. The bond between them should have dissolved the moment he spoke Meridia's name, unless the bond had never been hers alone to break. Serena pushed the thought away. False hope was a poison more dangerous than any she knew how to brew. She rose from her narrow bed and moved to the window, watching dawn paint the sky in shades of pale gold. The forest beyond her cottage stood silent and watchful, its ancient trees still bare from winter. In another month, leaves would return. In another month, her children would be born. And then she would need to decide what came next. Where to run. How to hide 2 babies with royal blood from a king who might never stop searching. If he was searching at all. The traders came to Briarwood Hollow on the first warm day of spring. Serena heard the commotion from her cottage, the excited shouts of villagers who saw few outsiders during the long winter months. She considered staying hidden, as she always did when strangers arrived, but young Pella, the miller's daughter, came running before she could retreat inside. "Mistress Wren," the girl gasped, using the false name Serena had given upon her arrival. "Mistress Wren, you must come hear what the traders say." Serena's heart seized. What news do they bring? Pella's face was pale beneath her excitement. "They speak of the Alpha King. They say he has lost his mind." The world tilted beneath Serena's feet. She gripped the doorframe to steady herself. "Lost his mind?" she managed. Pella nodded vigorously. "The traders say he has torn the kingdom apart searching for someone. A woman. No one knows her name or face, only that the king will burn down anything that stands between him and finding her." Serena's hand moved to her belly. The babies kicked sharply, as if responding to mention of their father. "They say the harvests have failed in the southern provinces," Pella continued breathlessly. "Wolves have gone feral near the borders, attacking travelers even in daylight. The king's own guard has been sent to every corner of Valderath, questioning everyone, searching every village and town." "Searching for what?" Serena whispered. "For her. This mystery woman. The traders say he has offered 20,000 gold pieces for information leading to her discovery. They say he has not slept in months. They say his wolf has nearly consumed him, and that some on the council fear he will go feral before the summer. 20,000 gold, a fortune beyond imagination." Serena forced her expression to remain calm. "The affairs of kings are not our concern, child. Thank your father for sharing the news." But after Pella had scurried away, Serena sank onto the wooden bench outside her door, her legs too weak to hold her. He was searching for her. Why would Dravek search for a woman he had publicly rejected? Why would he destroy his own kingdom for a lover he had discarded without a second glance? Unless something had been wrong that night. Unless the emptiness in his eyes had been something other than indifference. Her mark flared with sudden, searing heat. Serena gasped, pressing her hand to her thigh as warmth flooded through the bond she had thought severed. For the first time in 4 months, she did not feel alone on the other end of that invisible thread. She felt him. Desperate, broken. Closer than he had been in months. And getting closer still. 3 days after the traders departed, the wolves appeared. Serena noticed them at dusk, shadows moving between the ancient oaks at the edge of her property. She had been hanging herbs to dry on the cottage porch when a flicker of movement caught her eye. Her hands stilled on the bundle of sage as her gaze found the tree line. A shape stood motionless in the gathering darkness. Large, four-legged, silver fur catching the dying light. A wolf, but not a wild one. As she watched, frozen with growing dread, another emerged beside it, then a third. 4 massive wolves, their amber eyes fixed upon her cottage with an intelligence that was anything but animal. Scouts. Royal scouts. The mark on her thigh exploded with heat. Serena stumbled backward through her doorway, slamming the rough wooden door behind her as pain radiated through her body. This was nothing like the dull burn she had grown accustomed to over months of exile. This was searing, overwhelming, as if molten iron had been pressed directly to her flesh. And beneath the pain, she felt something else. A presence, vast and desperate, pushing against the edges of her consciousness. Reaching for her through the bond she had believed broken. Her babies kicked violently, movements coming from 2 different places at once. No, Serena breathed, both hands flying to her belly. No, please, not now. He was close, not just his wolves. Him. Her eyes darted around the small cottage, calculating escape routes. The back window led to the forest, but if his scouts were already watching, they would run her down before she made it 50 yards. The root cellar was hidden beneath a rug, but a wolf's nose would find her within minutes. Her swollen belly made climbing impossible. She was trapped. A heavy knock shook her front door. Serena's heart stopped. The wolves she had seen were in their shifted forms. They could not knock on doors, which meant someone in human form stood on her threshold. Another knock, more insistent. Mistress Wren. A male voice, unfamiliar, but not unkind. Please open the door. We mean you no harm. Serena laughed bitterly at that. Wolves who hunted a pregnant woman across kingdoms meant her no harm. How reassuring. But she had no choice. Running was impossible. Hiding was futile. And if she did not open the door willingly, they would simply break it down. She grabbed the iron fire poker from beside her hearth and moved toward the entrance. When she pulled the door open, 2 men stood on her threshold. One was clearly a warrior, his massive frame and alert posture marking him as a member of the royal guard. But it was the second man who drew Serena's attention. He was older, perhaps 50 winters, his dark hair streaked with threads of silver. His face bore the weathered lines of decades in service, and his eyes, a deep amber that seemed to see straight through her defenses, held something that looked almost like relief. "My lady," he said, and the title made Serena flinch. "I am Corvin, first beta to the Alpha King. We have been searching for you for a very long time." "You have made a mistake," Serena said, keeping her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her. "My name is Wren. I am a simple healer. Nothing more." Corvin's expression shifted to something like sympathy. "You are Serena, born without house or standing, formerly a servant in the royal castle of Ashenmoor. You bear the king's claiming mark on your inner left thigh and his children in your womb." The poker trembled in Serena's grip. "How do you know about the mark?" "Because the king has described it in detail to every wolf in the realm. Because he has not slept more than an hour at a time in 4 months. Because he is destroying everything he built to find the mate who vanished without a trace." Corvin paused. "May we come inside?" Serena wanted to refuse, but her legs were shaking, her mark was burning, and the babies had finally stilled, as if listening to every word. She stepped aside. Corvin entered alone, leaving the guard at the door. He looked around her modest cottage, taking in the drying herbs, the simple furniture, the narrow bed where she had spent countless nights crying until no tears remained. "He did not choose her," Corvin said quietly. "Meridia. He did not choose her willingly." Serena's knees buckled. She caught herself on the back of a chair, her knuckles white against the worn wood. "That is impossible," she whispered. We believed so, as well. Corvin reached into his coat and withdrew a folded parchment. Until we discovered this. He handed her the document. The seal was already broken, but she could see the serpent crest of House Veilstrom pressed into the dark wax. Serena read the words 3 times before their meaning fully penetrated her shock. The compound performed exactly as promised. The king remembered nothing of the claiming right and has shown no recognition of our arrangement. Payment in full has been delivered to your contact in the Eastern Territories. House Veilstrom thanks you for your expertise in matters of the mind. Poison, Serena breathed. They poisoned him. A compound derived from moonsbane mixed with other herbs our healers have not yet identified, Corvin confirmed. It suppressed his wolf entirely, severed his connection to his instincts and his bond. He was a puppet during the ceremony, speaking words that were not his own. Serena's hand flew to her mouth as nausea rolled through her. Not from the pregnancy, from the horror of understanding. The effects wore off 3 days after the ceremony, Corvin continued. The king woke screaming your name. He remembered nothing of claiming Meridia. Nothing of the celebration that followed. The first thing he did was run to find you. And I was already gone, Serena whispered. You were already gone. Corvin's voice was heavy with shared grief. He has not been the same since. His wolf fights constantly for dominance. He sleeps only when exhaustion claims him. The council fears he will go feral before the summer solstice. A wolf separated from its true mate for too long could lose itself entirely to the animal within. The human mind would recede, consumed by instinct and madness, and an alpha king, with power as vast as Dravek's, would become something catastrophic. Why did you not tell him where I am? Serena demanded. Why come to me in secret? Corvin's jaw tightened. He withdrew a second parchment from his coat. Because of this. The message was brief. The handwriting elegant but cold. The false mate has been located in the northern villages. Elimination will proceed before the next new moon. Long live Queen Meridia. Serena's blood turned to ice. Assassins, she breathed. The Veilstroms cannot afford to let you live, Corvin said grimly. You carry the true heirs to the throne. If you return and the king completes the bond, Meridia's claim dissolves. Their entire plot unravels. As if summoned by his words, Serena's mark flared with sudden vicious heat. But this time, the sensation was different. This was not the desperate searching she had felt before. This was warning, alarm, danger. Corvin stiffened at the same moment, his nostrils flaring. They are here, he growled. Through the cottage window, Serena saw shapes emerging from the darkness of the forest, not the silver-furred scouts who had watched her earlier. These wolves were darker, their movements coordinated with predatory precision. And leading them, stepping from the shadows with a crossbow already raised, walked a figure in black, whose face was hidden behind a mask carved from wolf bone. The Veilstrom assassins had arrived. The first arrow shattered Serena's window before she could draw breath to scream. Corvin moved with supernatural speed, shoving her toward the back of the cottage as glass exploded across the floor. The guard burst through the front door, already shifting mid-stride, his human form dissolving into a massive gray wolf that lunged toward the tree line with fangs bared. The cellar, Corvin commanded. Now. There is no escape from the cellar, Serena gasped, her hands wrapped protectively around her belly. You only need to survive until the king arrives. He felt your fear through the bond. He is coming. Another arrow punched through the wooden wall, embedding itself inches from Serena's head. Dark liquid glistened on its tip, catching the firelight. Poison. They are not trying to capture me, she realized aloud. They mean to kill me quickly, before he can reach me. Corvin's jaw tightened. The Veilstroms cannot afford witnesses. He pulled a long dagger from his belt and pressed it into her hands. The blade is silver-edged. It will wound even a shifted wolf. Use it if you must. Before Serena could respond, a howl of agony erupted from outside. The guard. Then terrible silence. Corvin's eyes flickered with his wolf rising to the surface. Stay hidden. Whatever happens, do not emerge until you hear my voice, or the king's. Then he was gone, his body exploding into wolf form as he crashed through the shattered window to join the battle. Serena stood frozen in her ruined cottage, the silver dagger clutched in her trembling hands. Through the broken glass she could see shapes moving in the moonlight, wolves clashing with wolves, the flash of blades, the sickening sounds of combat. Her mark burned with renewed intensity, and she gasped at the sensation that accompanied it. He was coming. She could feel his fury blazing through the bond like wildfire, his desperation, his terror at the thought of losing her again. But he was not close enough. Not yet. Through the window, she watched in horror as Corvin's wolf form was slammed against a massive oak with bone-cracking force. He struggled to rise, blood matting his silver-streaked fur, but 3 dark wolves circled him with patient malice. He was losing. The figure in the bone mask stepped into the clearing, crossbow trained on the cottage door. Behind the mask, cold eyes found Serena through the shattered window. "Come out, little servant," a female voice called, melodic and cruel. "Make this easy. I promise the poison works quickly. You will barely feel your heart stop." Serena's gaze dropped to the cellar door. She could hide as Corvin had instructed, could wait in the darkness and pray that Dravek arrived before the assassins found her. But Corvin would be dead by then. His guard was already silent, and she would be cowering underground while wolves died to protect her and her children. No, she had spent 4 months running, 4 months hiding, 4 months letting fear dictate her every choice while the man she loved destroyed himself searching for her. No more. Serena dropped the silver dagger and pressed her palms together. The power she had suppressed since childhood stirred in her chest. She had always been warned to hide this gift, had always been told that strange magic in someone of common blood would mark her as unnatural, as something to be destroyed or enslaved. But she was already marked for death. What did she have left to lose? The golden light bloomed between her hands, warm and ancient and fierce. Serena stepped through the shattered doorway into the chaos of battle. The effect was immediate. Every wolf in the clearing turned to stare at the pregnant woman who glowed like a fallen star. The assassin wolves hesitated, their formation breaking as primal instinct warred with training. Something about the light called to them. Something ancient. Something that whispered of pack and protection and the sacred bond between mother and young. Serena walked toward Corvin's fallen form, her bare feet leaving prints of luminescence in the blood-stained grass. "You will not have him," she said, and her voice carried harmonics that resonated with power beyond her understanding. "You will not have any of them." She knelt beside Corvin and pressed her glowing hands to his wounds. The beta gasped as healing energy poured into his broken body, knitting bone and closing gashes with impossible speed. One of the assassin wolves shook off its hesitation and lunged toward her with jaws wide. The light around Serena flared like the rising sun. The wolf was thrown backward with a yelp of pain, its dark fur smoldering where the radiance had touched it. It scrambled to its feet and fled into the forest, followed by 2 of its packmates. But not all of them ran. The masked figure stepped forward, crossbow raised and aimed directly at Serena's heart. Unlike the wolves, this assassin remained fully human, unaffected by the magic that had scattered the others. "Impressive," the woman said, her voice dripping with cold amusement. "The Veilstroms will be fascinated to learn that the king's whore is a witch. A shame you will not live to demonstrate your talents further." Serena's power flickered. The healing she had poured into Corvin had cost her more than she realized. Her reserves were dangerously low, and the babies within her had gone terrifyingly still. The assassin's finger tightened on the trigger. Serena closed her eyes. And then, the world exploded. Trees shattered like kindling as something massive crashed through the forest. The ground trembled with the force of its approach. The remaining assassin wolves scattered in pure terror, their training forgotten in the face of primal fear. The masked woman spun toward the sound, her crossbow swinging to track the new threat. She was not fast enough. A wolf the size of a warhorse burst from the tree line, its fur black as a moonless night. its eyes blazing with fierce amber fire. It moved with speed that defied nature, crossing the clearing in a single devastating bound. Its jaws closed around the assassin's crossbow arm with a sickening crunch. The woman's scream was cut short as the massive wolf shook her like a broken doll, then flung her shattered body into the darkness. It turned in a circle, searching for more threats, finding none. Then those burning eyes fixed on Serena. She could not move, could not breathe, could only stare at the creature that radiated power like heat from a bonfire. The wolf approached her slowly, each step deliberate and careful. Blood dripped from its muzzle. Its massive body blocked out the moonlight. And yet, when it finally stood before her, it lowered its great head and pressed its nose gently to her swollen belly. The babies kicked, both of them simultaneously, as if responding to their father's presence. The wolf made a sound that was almost a whimper. "Dravek," Serena whispered. The shift happened in the space between heartbeats. One moment, a wolf stood before her, massive and terrifying and beautiful. The next, a man knelt in the blood-soaked grass, his hands hovering over her stomach as if he was afraid to touch her. He looked up, and Serena saw that the Alpha King was weeping. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times during her months of exile. She had imagined rage, imagined cold indifference, imagined him dragging her back to Ashenmoor in chains to face punishment for her disappearance. She had never imagined him on his knees before her, tears streaming down his face, his entire body trembling with barely contained emotion. "You are alive," Dravek breathed. His voice was raw, shattered, as if he had been screaming for months on end. "You are alive, and you are—" His eyes dropped to her swollen belly. His hand reached toward it, then stopped, hovering inches from the fabric of her dress. "May I?" he asked. The question broke something in Serena's chest. The Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in all of Valderath, was asking permission to touch his own children. She took his hand and pressed it to her stomach. The babies kicked immediately, movements coming from 2 different places. Dravek's expression transformed with wonder as his palm flattened against her belly to feel more. "Children," he whispered. "Our children. Serena, why did you not tell me?" The question shattered the fragile peace of the moment. Serena stepped backward, pulling away from his touch. The warmth that had flooded through her dissolved into the cold reality of everything that had happened. "Tell you?" Her voice came out sharper than she intended. "When would I have done that, Dravek? Before or after you claimed Meridia in front of the entire kingdom?" Dravek flinched, as if she had driven a blade into his heart. "I did not claim her. I would never choose anyone but you. I saw you." The words tore from her throat, carrying 4 months of grief and rage. "I was there. I watched you take her hand. I watched you stand before our people and declare that she would be your queen while I hid in the shadows like some shameful secret." "Serena, please." Dravek rose to his feet, his hands reaching for her. "I was poisoned. Corvin told you. The Veilstroms used a compound that took my will, my memory, my very soul. I remember nothing of that night except waking 3 days later and finding you gone." "How convenient," Serena spat, even as her heart cracked at the agony written across his face. "Convenient?" Dravek's voice hardened with sudden fury. "You think any part of this has been convenient? I have spent 4 months hunting for you. 4 months fighting my wolf for control every waking moment. 4 months watching my kingdom crumble while I searched every village, every forest, and every corner of the realm for the mate who vanished without a single word. Because you rejected me. Because I was violated." The roar shook the clearing. The word hung between them, terrible and true. "Do you think I chose this? Do you think I wanted to wake up bound by oath to a woman I despise while the woman I love was gone? While our bond was screaming in my chest and I had no idea where you were, or if you were even alive?" His voice cracked on the last word, and Serena saw something in his eyes she had never expected to see. Vulnerability, Raw, desperate vulnerability from the most powerful wolf in 3 kingdoms. "I thought you had thrown me away," she whispered, her anger faltering. "I thought everything you said to me was a lie." Dravek closed the distance between them in 2 strides. His hands cupped her face, tilting it up until she had no choice but to meet his gaze. "You are my mate," he said fiercely. "My true mate. The bond recognized you before I even knew your name. Do you think I would surrender that for politics? For power? For anything in this world or any other?" A sob escaped Serena's throat. She had held the grief inside for so long, had built walls around her shattered heart to keep herself functioning. But now, with his hands on her face and his words tearing through her defenses, those walls were crumbling into dust. "I waited for you," she choked out. "That night, after the ceremony, I was going to tell you about the babies. I had practiced the words so many times." Dravek's expression shattered completely. "Serena. And when you did not come, I went to find you. Instead, I found you claiming her. Looking at her like she was your future while I stood in the shadows with your children growing inside me." She pounded her fist against his chest, but there was no strength behind the blow. "Do you know what that felt like?" Dravek caught her wrist and pressed her palm flat against his heart. "Yes," he said quietly. "I know exactly what it felt like. Because I have spent every moment since that night living with the knowledge that I failed you, that something was done to me that made me betray the most important person in my entire existence." His heartbeat thundered beneath her hand, strong and steady and achingly familiar. "I have not touched Meridia," Dravek continued. "I have not been in the same room with her since I regained my senses. The council threatens rebellion daily. Half the noble houses have withdrawn their support." He laughed bitterly. "They believe I have gone mad, and perhaps I have. But I would burn this kingdom to ashes before I let anyone but you stand beside me on that throne." "I love you," Serena whispered. The words fell from her lips before she could stop them. "I loved you when I thought you had betrayed me. I loved you through 4 months of exile and heartbreak." Dravek made a choked sound and pulled her into his arms. Through the bond, she felt the walls he had built around his heart crumbling into nothing. "And I love you," he breathed against her hair. "From this moment until my last breath and beyond." The journey to Ashenmoor should have taken 2 days. Dravek's wolves made it in 1. Serena rode before the Alpha King on his massive black stallion, his arm wrapped securely around her waist, his body shielding her from the biting wind. She had protested at first, insisting she could ride her own mount, but Dravek had simply lifted her onto his saddle and silenced her objections with a look that permitted no argument. "My wolf needs you close," he had said, his voice rough with emotion. 4 months of separation nearly destroyed us both. I will not let you out of my reach until the bond is complete, and every threat to your safety is eliminated." As they rode through the night, Dravek told her everything. He told her about waking from the drugged haze to find Meridia in his chambers, attempting to consummate a union he had no memory of agreeing to. About the horror that had flooded through him when he realized what had been done. About throwing Meridia from his rooms and ordering her confined. They reached the outskirts of Ashenmoor as dawn painted the sky in shades of blood and gold. The capital city spread before them, its ancient spires reaching toward the heavens. But something was terribly wrong. Smoke rose from several quarters of the city. The distant sound of screaming reached their ears. And on the great banner that flew above the castle gates, the royal crest of the moon and wolf had been replaced by the silver serpent of House Veilstrom. "No," Corvin breathed. "They would not dare." Dravek's arm tightened around Serena as a growl built in his chest. "They have taken the castle." A rider emerged from the city gates, galloping toward them at reckless speed. One of Dravek's scouts, her face ashen with fear. "My king," she gasped, reining her horse to a halt. "The Veilstroms struck at midnight. They had allies within the guard, wolves we believed loyal. Lord Veilstrom has declared himself regent, claiming you have gone mad. Lady Meridia has been crowned queen." A snarl tore from Dravek's throat. There is more. The scout's voice trembled. They have taken hostages. The servants who remained loyal to you, the guards who refused to bend the knee. They are to be executed at midday as traitors. 43 of them. Serena felt the blood drain from her face. Including the old healer who served in the castle infirmary, the scout continued. The one called Miravel. Miravel. The name struck Serena like a physical blow. Miravel, who had taught her everything she knew about healing, who had covered for her absences when she slipped away to meet Dravek in the gardens. We have to save them, Serena said fiercely. Dravek looked down at her. Serena, you cannot enter that city. If the Veilstroms capture you, if we do nothing, 43 innocent people die. I will not have their blood on my hands. For a long moment the Alpha King was silent. Then, slowly, a fierce smile spread across his face. My queen, he murmured. Even now, you think of others before yourself. He turned to address the army of wolves assembled behind them. The Veilstroms believe they have won. They believe their treachery has succeeded. That their false queen sits secure upon a stolen throne. His eyes blazed with amber fire. They are wrong. A howl rose from the assembled wolves, hundreds of voices joining in a chorus of fury and loyalty. Today, we take back what is ours. The battle for Ashenmoor was brutal and swift. The Veilstroms had expected resistance. They had not expected an army of wolves driven by 4 months of rage and the primal need to protect their king's mate and unborn heirs. Serena watched from a protected position on the hillside as Dravek led the charge. Even from this distance, she could feel his fury through the bond, a blazing inferno that scorched through her veins. His wolf form was terrible to behold, a shadow of death that scattered Veilstrom defenders like leaves in a hurricane. Within an hour, the outer walls had fallen. Within 2, the castle gates lay in splinters. But as the sun climbed toward its noon peak, a messenger came running with news that made Serena feel ice flood her veins. My lady, Lord Veilstrom has barricaded himself in the throne hall with the hostages. He says if the king does not surrender within the hour, he will execute them all. Serena was moving before she consciously decided to, ignoring the protests of the guards Dravek had left to protect her. Her body ached, her back screaming with the strain of carrying the twins, but none of that mattered. She found Dravek at the massive doors of the throne hall, held back by Corvin and 4 other wolves. You cannot go in there, Corvin was saying. It is exactly what Veilstrom wants. Serena pushed through the guards. Dravek. He spun at the sound of her voice. Serena, what are you doing here? I ordered you to stay on the hill. I know what you ordered. She stopped before him, tilting her chin up defiantly. And I am telling you that I will not hide while others die in my place. She placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heart pound beneath her palm. I love you. And I will not let that love make me a coward. She turned toward the throne hall doors before he could respond. Lord Veilstrom, she called out, her voice ringing through the stone corridor. I am Serena, the woman your family has tried so hard to destroy. I am coming inside. Alone. Serena. No. Dravek grabbed her arm. She looked back at him, her eyes steady despite the terror coursing through her. Trust me, please. Something passed between them through the bond. Not words, but understanding. Faith. And beneath it all, a desperate prayer. Dravek released her arm. Serena pushed open the doors and stepped into the throne hall. The scene inside was worse than Serena had imagined. 43 hostages knelt in a line before the raised dais, their hands bound behind their backs, their faces pale with terror. Armed Veilstrom soldiers stood behind them with blades drawn, ready to execute their prisoners at a single command. And on the throne that should have belonged to Dravek sat Lord Aldrich Veilstrom, his silver hair gleaming in the torchlight, his cold eyes fixed upon her with predatory interest. Beside him stood Meridia. So this is the creature that has caused so much trouble, Meridia said, her lip curling with disdain. a servant girl with a swollen belly and delusions of grandeur. Serena ignored her, finding Mirabelle among the hostages. The old healer's eyes widened with recognition and fear. "Run, child," Mirabelle whispered. "Run while you still can." "I am done running." Serena turned to face Lord Veilstrom. "You want the king to surrender. I am offering you something better." Veilstrom's eyebrow rose. "And what might that be?" "Me." Serena placed her hand on her belly. "The king's mate and his unborn heirs. Take me as your hostage instead. Release the others." "No." Dravek's anguish tore through the bond from beyond the doors, but Veilstrom was smiling, a serpent's smile that never reached his eyes. "An interesting proposition. Very well. Guards, release the prisoners. Secure the girl." The hostages were cut free, stumbling toward the doors in confused relief. Mirabelle tried to reach Serena, but soldiers pushed her back with the others. As rough hands grabbed Serena's arms, she felt strangely calm. The bond with Dravek pulsed with his panic, his rage, his desperate need to reach her. But beneath all of that, she could feel something else. The babies, stirring within her. And with them, a power she had never felt before. The twins were not merely Dravek's heirs. They were the product of a true mate bond, something that had not occurred in the royal bloodline for 7 generations. And those children, even unborn, carried magic of their own. Magic that was now awakening in response to the threat against their mother. Golden light began to emanate from Serena's belly. Veilstrom's eyes widened. "What is this sorcery?" The light spread, flowing through her limbs like liquid fire. But unlike the healing magic she had used before, this was different. Wilder. More primal. This was the power of the wolf itself. Pain exploded through her body as bones began to shift. "No!" she gasped, falling to her knees. "Not now. Please, not now." But the transformation would not be denied. 4 months of suppressed change, held back by her own fear, demanded release. The twins' awakening power had triggered what she had been fighting since the night Dravek first marked her. She was becoming a wolf. The throne hall doors exploded inward. Dravek burst through in full wolf form, his massive black body hurtling toward her even as her own body tore itself apart. His howl shook the ancient stones, a sound of pure anguish and protective fury. Veilstrom soldiers rushed to intercept him. Meridia screamed orders. Chaos erupted on every side. And Serena, caught in the agony of transformation, could only pray that she survived long enough to meet her mate on the other side. The pain was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Every bone in her body shattered and reformed. Every muscle tore and rebuilt itself. Her skin rippled and split as silver-white fur pushed through from beneath. She screamed, but the sound that emerged was no longer human. Through the haze of agony, she was aware of Dravek fighting his way toward her. His massive wolf form scattered Veilstrom soldiers like leaves, but he was not fast enough. Lord Veilstrom had drawn a blade from his throne, a sword that gleamed with unnatural silver light, wolfsbane-coated steel, poison strong enough to kill any wolf with a single cut. "If I cannot have the throne," Veilstrom snarled, advancing on Serena's convulsing body, "then I will end the bloodline entirely." The sword rose above her head. Serena's hand, no longer fully human, shot up and caught the blade. Silver-white fur covered her fingers. Claws that had not existed moments before dug into the poisoned steel. The wolfsbane burned against her palm, searing her flesh, but she held firm. "No," she growled, and her voice carried harmonics that resonated through the very stones of the castle. The transformation completed in a surge of blinding light. Where a pregnant woman had knelt, a wolf now stood. Her fur was the color of moonlight on fresh snow, her eyes burning with fierce amber light. She was smaller than Dravek's massive form, but no less magnificent, and she was furious beyond measure. Serena lunged, her jaws closed around Veilstrom's sword arm with savage precision. The lord screamed as bones crunched, the poisoned blade clattering harmlessly to the floor. She shook him once, twice, then flung him aside. Across the hall, Meridia shrieked, "Kill her! Kill them both!" But the remaining Veilstrom soldiers were backing away, their faces pale with terror. One by one, they dropped their weapons and fled. Dravek reached her side, his black fur pressing against her white. Through the bond, she felt his overwhelming relief, his awe, and his fierce pride. "You shifted," his voice echoed in her mind. "I had motivation," she replied. Meridia had retrieved her father's fallen sword and was advancing toward them. "You destroyed everything," Meridia hissed. "You were supposed to be nothing." Serena shifted back to human, her body flowing through the change with surprising ease. She stood before her enemy, one hand resting on her belly where the twins still grew, miraculously unharmed. "I stole nothing," Serena said quietly. "The bond between Dravek and me was forged by fate, not ambition. Your family tried to break it with poison and lies. All you accomplished was proving that true mates cannot be separated." Meridia screamed and charged. Dravek's jaws closed around her wrist, forcing her to drop the sword. He shifted back to human form, holding the struggling Meridia immobile while his wolves flooded the hall. "Meridia of House Veilstrom," Dravek announced. "You and your family are charged with treason, attempted murder of the true queen, conspiracy against the crown, and the use of forbidden compounds against your king. You will face judgment before the assembled packs." Guards brought cloaks to cover them both. Dravek wrapped Serena in warm fabric with careful hands. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. Serena paused, taking inventory. She felt different now, stronger, more alive. The constant ache that had plagued her throughout her exile was gone, replaced by a thrumming vitality. "I am well. Better than well." Dravek's hand found her belly, and his expression transformed with wonder as he felt movement from two distinct places. "They are strong," Serena said, covering his hand with her own. The transformation helped them. Their magic triggered the shift. "They saved us, Dravek. Our children saved us all." Dravek pulled her into his arms. Through the bond, she felt the walls he had built around his heart finally crumbling. When Veilstrom raised that sword, he whispered against her hair, "I thought I lost you." "I am here." Serena pulled back to cup his face in her hands. "I am not going anywhere." Dravek's eyes searched her face. "The bond needs to be completed. Properly. If you will have me." Serena thought of everything they had endured. The secret meetings, the whispered promises, the devastating betrayal that had not been a betrayal at all. The months of separation, the battle and the blood, and the terrifying, glorious moment when she had embraced the wolf within. "I will have you," she said. "I have always been yours." He kissed her then, in front of the assembled wolves and the defeated Veilstroms and the hostages weeping with relief. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a claiming, a promise, a declaration written in fire. When they broke apart, Dravek tilted his head, baring his throat to her in the ancient gesture of a wolf offering himself to his mate. "Claim me," he said. "Make it complete." Serena understood instinctively what to do. Her wolf rose within her, guiding her movements as she pressed her lips to the spot where his neck met his shoulder. She felt his pulse thundering beneath her mouth. Her teeth sank into his flesh. The bond exploded between them. It was not pain. It was completion. Two halves of a single soul finally becoming whole. Serena felt Dravek's essence pour into her as hers flowed into him. Every memory, every emotion, every secret corner of their hearts laid bare to each other. She saw the night of the claiming rite through his eyes, not the empty puppet she had witnessed from the shadows, but the horror of waking 3 days later with no memory of what he had done. She felt the desperation of his search, the way his wolf had howled in anguish every night. She felt his terror when Veilstrom raised that sword over her convulsing body, felt the way his heart had stopped, felt the overwhelming relief when her transformation completed, and she had stood before him, magnificent and powerful and alive. She saw herself through his eyes, not a nameless servant, but a woman of extraordinary courage, the mother of his children, his fated mate, the most precious soul in his existence, and he saw himself through hers, a man who had fought against impossible odds to find her, who loved her with a ferocity that transcended poison and politics, and even death itself. When Serena finally released him, they were both trembling. "My queen," Dravek breathed. "My king," she answered. Around them, wolves began to howl, a celebration of victory, of justice, of a true mate bond finally, completely, eternally sealed. In the days that followed, the Veilstroms faced judgment. Lord Aldrich was executed for his crimes. Meridia was exiled to the frozen wastes beyond the northern mountains, stripped of her name and her wolf. The kingdom began to heal. On a warm evening 7 weeks after the battle, with summer finally arrived, Dravek returned from a council meeting to find his chambers empty. His heart seized for a single terrible moment before the bond pulsed with warmth and reassurance. She was close. She was safe. She was simply not where he expected her to be. He followed the thread of their connection through the castle, past the great hall and the kitchens, down a winding stair he had not descended since childhood, through a heavy door that groaned on ancient hinges, into the den. The royal nursery had not been used in decades, not since Dravek himself had outgrown its protective walls, but someone had cleaned it recently. Fresh furs lined the curved floor. Candles flickered in sconces, casting warm light across the domed stone ceiling. And there, in the center of the room, lay Serena. She was asleep. Her silver-white hair spread across a pillow of soft pelts. Her face held a peace he had never seen in her before. All the shadows of grief and fear finally lifted. But it was not her sleeping form that stole the breath from Dravek's lungs. 2 tiny bundles lay nestled against her chest. A boy with dark hair like his father. A girl with silver-white wisps like her mother. Both of them had their small hands curled into the fabric of Serena's dress, anchoring themselves to her even in sleep. The twins had arrived 5 days ago, 3 weeks early but perfectly healthy, in the small hours of the morning while Dravek had been settling a border dispute. He had ridden through the night to reach her, but by the time he burst through the castle gates, the ordeal was already over. Now he stood frozen in the doorway, watching his mate and his children sleep. His pups were safe, fed, curled around their mother like she had always belonged to them. The bond between them thrummed with contentment. Through it, he could feel Serena's dreams, soft and peaceful. He could feel the twins as well, their tiny presences already reaching toward him, recognizing their father even in their first days of life. His wolf stirred within him, overwhelmed by the scene before them. Mate. Pups. Pack. Home. Dravek crossed the room on silent feet and lowered himself to the furs beside his family. Serena stirred at his presence, her eyes fluttering open. "You came," she murmured, her voice thick with sleep and happiness. "I will always come." He pressed a kiss to her forehead, then to each of his children. "You should have sent for me the moment the labor began." There was no time. Serena smiled, shifting so he could see the twins more clearly. They were impatient to meet the world, just like their father. Dravek gathered his family against his chest, his massive frame curving protectively around them. The boy yawned, revealing toothless gums, and the girl made a small sound of contentment as she burrowed deeper into her mother's warmth. "They are perfect," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "They are ours." Serena rested her head against his shoulder. "That is all that matters." Outside their den, the wolves of Valderath lifted their voices in celebration. The sound echoed across the kingdom, carrying news of the royal birth to every corner of the realm. A new chapter had begun. The story of a servant girl who became a queen, of an alpha king who fought impossible odds to find his true love, of a bond that could not be broken by poison or politics, or even the cruelest twists of fate. They had found each other against all odds, and curled together in the den, with their pups safe and fed and nestled between them like they had always belonged, they would never be parted again. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story.